In this video, we're going to talk about Bob Chapek and his mission to get the politics out of Disney. We got some new news about that. We're going to talk about it up next.
Welcome to Orange Grove 55.
Welcome aboard to another episode of OG 55, where we're talking Bob Chapek making major moves at the Walt Disney Company. He's going to try to kind of untie this knot that's been in the works for many years, which is politics within the Walt Disney Company. So very interesting stuff we're going to talk about today. But before we do that, I want to go ahead and introduce my fantastic colleague, my producer, Dre, my friend, my confidant, Vash Guy. Welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, I really do appreciate you having me back on here and talking about this. This is really a fascinating topic. Again, it's one that we've been talking about for some time here, and well, looks like the boys over there at Valiant Renegade, WW Pro, and KAMRAN PASHA maybe have a little bit more to say on this. So this is a great topic, and I do appreciate it. If you guys want to follow me, you can go ahead and do so right down there at Vash Sky, just right there. Type in Twitter, should pop up. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info squeezed fresh right from the Grove. There you go.
Perfect. All right, so let's dive right into this topic. This is fascinating stuff here. And this comes from That Park Place. All right, so Bob Chapek announces Disney is not the place for politics. And this is by WDW Pro. Okay, so it says here, it is being reported by Hollywood screenwriter and scooper KAMRAN PASHA that the Walt Disney Company CEO Bob Chapek spoke with Kareem Daniel, chairperson of Disney Media and Entertainment Division, at the El Capitan in front of an audience on Thursday. At the gathering, Bob Chapek declared for the first time publicly that the Walt Disney Company will exit politics and ideology going forward. This seems to corroborate reports from this website, That Park Place, by the way, that Chapek and the board of directors plan to alter company policy in the next 12 months. And this is what Chapek said. Quote, when people come to a Disney park, they don't walk in with their political views on their sleeves. People don't come to Disney to get political points of view, either from the left or the right. Disney is a source of positivity in the world, no matter your sex, race, or politics. That's the core focus for me, end quote. Then he goes on to say, quote, you know, the mainstream media will tell you can't do that job, but I never listen to them. And basically with this one, this is kind of like that whole, to give the audience a little like context, he's referring to how Hollywood has this very kind of like internal like bubble where like you got to be part of the Hollywood club to become like a CEO of a company like Disney. And Bob Chapek's saying, no, look, if you ran a theme park, you can be a CEO too, just like I was basically. Like these divisions can kind of cross pollinate and what have you. So that's kind of where that's coming from.
Which is that's a whole thing in itself, because as
totally.
we know, that was one of the things that got Chapek in hot water just from jump, was because he wasn't one of them. He wasn't one of this kind of Hollywood establishment, this kind of the club, as Pasha refers to it, right? These people who feel that they have their chops in the industry, and really industry guys should be running the industry, not some theme park retail guy. So, this is Chapek, as Pasha astutely points out on a recent video, which we will absolutely get to. Hey, look, listen, he's telling everybody, hey, the people who are in theme parks or in retail, you can go ahead and do what I have done, essentially. You can be in charge of a historically entertainment company, even though you necessarily didn't come from the entertainment industry, right? The theme park guys, you can go ahead and do stuff on the studio side of things and vice versa. And that really speaks to kind of the issue that we brought up on this show many times before. Chapek came from retail, right? And if you think about it in terms of an entertainment studio, as a retailer, you're kind of at the mercy of what the studio dreams up or what they give you in terms of, IPs, characters, and so forth. And what he's saying is hey, you know what? We don't have to necessarily be beholden to these guys. We can set some terms as well. And that's got a lot of people, rubbed the wrong way. And honestly, this kind of reassessment of power, this has been a thing for Chapek going back even when he started out his term here.
Well, and the fascinating thing about Bob Chapek, and I'll be the first to say it, I was completely wrong about this guy because I wasn't expecting this sort of revolutionary kind of fire that we're kind of seeing from him, where internally he's telling people it doesn't matter, ignore the Hollywood rules, ignore the mainstream media. We're going to do things differently. We're going to break boundaries. And if you work in retail, you can become the CEO. And if you work in this division, you can be that. And he's breaking the rules, the established kind of like this, like, what is it? Quota, right? The status quo is what I'm trying to say. He's breaking that status quo. And honestly, it's a lot more revolutionary than I expected from him. I really didn't expect this. And I love what I'm seeing here. I really, really do so far. I love this idea that, we don't need to be Hollywood snobs. We can get there too. And I like that. I really, really like that.
Well, and I think one of the biggest reasons why we're seeing a breakup of the status quo, because I think Chapek, and I think correctly, has recognized that the company and their positions and their political stances haven't really been necessarily the recipe for success, that there are really some underlying issues here that need to be addressed, which is why I think Chapek is taking this kind of more aggressive stance than maybe we necessarily thought that he would. And you're not alone in this, OG. I thought that he was going to be kind of like, oh, okay, he's going to just kind of take the course, take the company on a course already set by Iger, not rock the boat that much, right? That's what I previously thought myself. But I think, like I said before, I think he's recognized here with the changes in the marketplace, changes with the kind of the country as a whole, and how that can affect even maybe the retail side of things. That I think he's kind of recognizing, hey, look, if we keep on this current course, this is not going to be good for us. We really need to do some different things here than maybe my predecessor did. And we'll talk about what Bob Iger has done with the company, not just in this show, but maybe in an upcoming show with a special guest. You might want to go ahead and stay tuned for that. But
absolutely.
When it comes to the politics itself, though, I think this is really kind of the heart of the issue. It's like, look, listen, my predecessor wanted to maybe go into a more political direction with the company, and that's just not going to be financially viable long term. We can't simply ostracize half of the audience here. We really have to incorporate stories and different ideas regarding what the company puts out. Right. And do it in a way that's far less partisan, and that could potentially push people away. I think he's recognized that, and I think that's why he has taken the aggressive stance that he has, because he knows that some of the stuff that's been done before is just not going to work long term.
No, it's not going to work long term. And we live in and I said this before in many other videos, but we live in a very divided country right now. And really, it's 50-50 pretty much, right? It's either, left or right. So if a company like Disney goes political, you're destined to piss off one side or the other. There's no winning when you do that. If you go far left, then all the conservatives get mad. If you go far right, then all the progressives get mad, and you don't really win. And Chapek understands that. Chapek is a money guy. Chapek is like, I want to make money from everybody. I'll take progressive dollars. I'll take conservative dollars. And I'm not going to sit here and exclude half of my audience because of these political pet projects. And he's absolutely right on that. He's absolutely correct on that. They got to get out of this stuff. And we've seen that it's okay to do that because Universal is fucking doing that. They are doing that in Florida. They stayed out of that whole thing with the Florida bill, and they're doing just fine. Is Universal struggling to get people through the gates because they didn't speak out about the bill? Absolutely not. Their last quarter was a banger quarter for the theme parks, at least. It was a banger quarter. I think it was their best quarter on record for the theme parks.
Yes.
So Disney, I mean, you don't have to speak out against this stuff and get involved in these political games. Universal is really showing you that. So proof is in the pudding.
And WW Pro has talked about this too at that park place. He's really talked about how entertainment itself is kind of a unifying thing for the culture, a unifying thing for, the country, really. If people talk about, oh, we're living in a very partisan time, right? We're living in a very divided time when it comes to the sentiments regarding kind of social cohesion in the country. One of the biggest reasons is because the entertainment itself has become so political and has become so divisive and has become so partisan. And I think that's what kind of Chapek is speaking to. And like you said, for Universal, hey, Universal not taking a side each way, whether it come to the local politics of Florida or with their IPs in their theme parks. It has shown to be incredibly successful. And look, you might have some stuff that might be looked at as maybe different by a certain group of people later on, right? We've seen that with Song of the South, Splash Mountain, and so forth. But do you necessarily have to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in order to, for lack of a better word, placate that side? I don't know if you necessarily do. Now, as we said before, Tiana's Bayou Adventure, I am looking forward to seeing what they can do with that property. I am looking, because I do think the Princess and the Frog is a wonderful IP that should have a presence within the theme parks, especially Disneyland that has a New Orleans Square that can really leverage that IP accordingly, but doesn't necessarily have to take over a beloved attraction that will further divide people. That's really kind of that's. I think that's worth debating. That's worth discussing. So, and I think Chapek, maybe he's not speaking to that particular issue, but he is saying, and he always comes at it with a theme park perspective, which is very, very fascinating and interesting.
Right.
He doesn't say, oh, when people go into the movie theater to see our films. No, he says when they walk into a theme park, and we've seen them use that kind of language multiple times before. Very interesting. But he says when people walk in there, by and large, people don't come in expecting a necessary political bias or to be preached to or whatever. Right. They're looking for entertainment that's good for the entire family, that's good for all sides of the spectrum, or the broadest sides of the spectrum as you can possibly get. Right. And some people have kind of poo-pooed that. Oh well, there are people that do this, and people. He's speaking generally, speaking broadly, speaking to the general populace, the normies as we call them. Yeah. He's not speaking for the politically active amongst the various sides. So I thought that was very interesting and a point worth noting.
Yeah, and a lot of people have this fear, and I've seen this out on social media a lot, where it's like, well, if Disney gets out of politics, right, then it's just going to be a bunch of movies about white guys. And it's like, straight white guys. That's all we're going to get because they're not getting into politics. And that is blatantly false. There is a way, I think, to be organically inclusive and to include other cultures by putting story first. Like a movie like Coco, for example, is a beautiful movie, gorgeous movie, absolutely gorgeous. But it doesn't feel like it's like a shoehorn, like checkbox, like kind of thing, right? It's this organic thing. It came from this place of like, oh, cool, we have a great story to tell. Let's tell it. And it just so happens that it takes place in this beautiful Mexican culture, right?
Yes.
And I think that's kind of the direction that the company should go in. Tell these stories of these different cultures and be inclusive, but don't make it a quota. Don't make it a checkbox. That's when it gets kind of gross, in my opinion. Yes. Like, make it authentic. If there's a Chinese storyteller or a storyteller from Vietnam or somebody from, I don't know, Russia or whoever wants to tell stories at Disney about their culture, that's fantastic. But Disney shouldn't go out there and go, well, I don't know, we haven't released an Australian movie yet. We should probably check that box. And we haven't released a German movie yet. We should probably check that box. And we haven't released a Vietnamese movie yet. We should probably check that box. That's gross. But if there's stories that are inclusive and it comes from that place of like, we want to tell this great story, this more organic kind of feel, then that's great. So you can be inclusive without doing the whole like, oh, look at us, we're patting ourselves on the back because we checked this many boxes. You know, there's a way to do it. There's just a way to do it. It's all about the approach.
Exactly, 100%. And what you're speaking to, hey, look, listen, diversity and inclusion isn't necessarily political. It's when you forward these things for political reasons or for ideological reasons that is when they get political, right? It's when you it's when you do the quota thing like you're talking about, you know, where we have to have a certain amount of this, and that, and we have to. There's no question, you know, or we have to tear down a certain group of characters because, well, historically, you know, they're the colonizers or whatever the term you want to use, right? And for others, we have to bring them up and we have to uplift them because they've been historically marginalized. You know, it's those kinds of things that really kind of get people to say, ooh, wait a minute. Is this really about the story? Or is this more about the ideology? Is this about, you know, the message or whatever terminology you want to use for this? That's where it can kind of get really, you know, divisive, in all honesty. And so I don't think diversity and inclusion are inherently political. It's when people use those in order to seek, you know, in order to further ideological or political agendas and so forth. That's when they get political, and that's where the aversion comes from. And to be honest, you know, I'm not just putting this on one side. I will say the other side kind of now has maybe a natural aversion to these things, which maybe they shouldn't. You know, I mean, not a natural aversion. Maybe that's a wrong phraseology to use, but maybe like almost like a conditioned aversion towards these things.
Right. And it's almost like a habitual thing now. It's like automatically write it off because
exactly. It's like, oh well, you know, this person's, you know, represented on screen first and foremost. I'm not gonna, you know. It's like no, let's not do that. Let's not be so tribal. And I will say this for both sides here. Just because, you know, a group of people are represented or included on screen doesn't inherently mean that that's a political statement by them. From what I understand, as KAMRAN PASHA has said multiple times, I guess Miss Marvel, who many thought, you know, was going to be one of these things that is, you know, inherently divisive or so forth, or maybe the diversity being represented was going to have maybe a political motivation to it, was going to be, you know, an inherently political piece of work. And apparently it was not. Apparently there were there were some maybe more traditional values introduced and so forth. And apparently her character and the story featured was really at the forefront and focus, which is good to see. And I think that's what we want. It's not about who's on screen. It's about the story. It's about that character and making a compelling piece of film that everybody can get immersed in. And to speak on KAMRAN PASHA himself, this name that I keep on using, he actually had an appearance on Valiant Renegade's channel that went into maybe his background and his story that might provide some context for our viewers on who this person is and why he is a pretty good authority on this subject. So I'll go ahead and have him speak of it in his words here. Let's see right there.
KAMRAN drops this piece on his Patreon here. So KAMRAN, I'm going to turn this over to you. Tell us about this. And you were contacted by one of your Patreon members, which please, y'all go make sure you're sub to KAMRAN's Patreon, and keep up with that, because a lot of these conversations kind of start with some stuff from there, just as like they start with Pro on that Park Place. So make sure y'all checking that out. But KAMRAN, tell us about what you found out from one of your Patreon members who's a Disney, let's call him Disney Insider. I guess.
They're Disney Insider. They're an employee. Yeah. I have several that identified themselves. They were just random people that subscribed over the last year, and then that they started sending me DMs, and I was able to confirm that they actually did work at Disney because they started providing me internal memos, such as I was the one that actually scooped. I scooped Deadline when someone provided me that first a memo that Chapek released. That created all the drama where he was trying to when he was saying to people that we're gonna back off of politics, right? That was sent to me, at 7 a.m. in the morning when the person had showed up at the office and saw that email, and I put it out there about a half an hour before the trade supported it. So I knew for a fact that, okay, these people are actually who they claim to be, right? They were giving me real confirmable information. So this is one of them. This person comes on once every few weeks and just drops stuff that I'm like, whoa, okay, hello. For example, this particular person said about a month ago, sent me a DM saying, just want to let you know that Bob Chapek has been privately telling, at the height of all of the chaos, the PR chaos around the Florida bill and all of that, and how he was forced to do his little hostage video. He said, in the midst of all that, where people saying, look, he's abdicated, it's over, look at him, right? This gentleman sent me, I guess a gentleman, I don't want to reveal, but this person sent me this message.
Don't be gendering people now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to identify, so God bless them. And also, I don't want to give them who they are. But this person that said, Chapek's been telling the executives privately, this is all just for show. We just have to, what we've all been saying, that we just got to weather the storm of the PR, we got to weather the storm of the trades and the people with an agenda. But I'm going to pull this company out of politics. It's not a question. Right. And that's what he was telling them internally. That was sent to me a month ago. So now this same person who I've come to trust sent me this very lengthy thing here. And I'm just going to read a very short portion of it. Right. They sent me this lengthy thing about midnight last night. And I was up and I was like, oh, my God, I've got to share this. Right. And I shared this. And WDW Pro is very graciously also connected to it. And it supports a lot of what he has been suggesting in his articles in thatparkplace.com. So I just want to read you a very brief portion of what this person said. Hold on. You got it on the screen there, and I'm actually trying to pull up my own thing here.
So he goes on to elaborate what this person actually sent to him. And as you heard, for our viewers at home, you heard that, he had, one of these, this source in his ear, going all the way back to, what was it, March, April?
Yeah.
when that whole thing actually took place, saying, this is all for show. This isn't necessarily what it appears to be. And to be honest, as we've come out of that might actually be spot on there with the, firing of Peter Rice and so forth. And that, anybody who maybe crossed him, right, might have, during that time or maybe even before, that might have, they might have consequences headed their way. And that might be implicating some big name people, which, I don't know, should we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, let's talk about
what's going on there.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Well, okay, before we get to that, I'll just say KAMRAN PASHA, he's been working in the industry for a long time. He actually worked for Disney about 10 years ago. So he knows his stuff here, and he's very connected. And like I said, the sourcing, whether it be WDW Pro, Valiant Renegade himself, or KAMRAN PASHA, it speaks for themselves. They've been right more times than they've been wrong, and so I think that's really important to clarify and to put out there, because I know some people were talking about the sources here, and they were saying, oh well, this is right leaning or right wing stuff or whatever, or at least it's being picked up by maybe historically right leaning outlets and so forth, and it's like, understand that even though the information might not necessarily how should I put this? It might not be politically, what should I say? Even though some sides might not like the information coming out, doesn't mean it's not true. Right. It doesn't mean that it's wholly inaccurate or whatever, or inherently inaccurate. We shouldn't necessarily see information coming out necessarily through a partisan or tribal lens. If they're right, they're right. And like I've said before, these guys have been right more often than not. You were going to say something, OG?
Well, yeah, no, I was going to say, I mean, you don't have to, and I'm not speaking necessarily to about that Park Place or whatever. I'm speaking kind of in broad terms, but you don't have to necessarily agree with a person's politics. But I think that it's important, like you said, Dre, to kind of get out of this tribalistic mentality where it's like, well, I think that person is a conservative, or I think that person is a progressive, so I'm going to completely disregard any information that they have. And that's really, in my opinion, that really shuts you out. It's kind of an ignorant stance because it's very closed-minded. I don't have to agree with someone politically, but I can look at the information about Chapek maybe and go, oh, wow, okay, this is interesting information, and just because they're conservative doesn't mean that information is automatically wrong, you know.
Correct.
And that's the one thing I love about that Park Place and Valiant Renegade, and when the work they do over there is because like it's very hard to find like outlets, whether that's in print or whether that's like, you know, like what we do with like YouTube and stuff, that like take the Chapek thing and look at it from like a real honest, like intellectual standpoint, where they're not just bald man bad all day long. Look, we're in this Diz Twitter community, right? And a lot of the Diz Twitter bubble, the theme park Disney bubble, is all about just everything Chapek does is bad. And I think there's a hunger out there for just like some real conversation about what is Chapek actually doing. Let's talk about it. You don't have to like it. Some of his decisions are crap. Some of them are good, but let's just have an honest discussion. And that's sorely missing. And Valiant Renegade, WDW Pro, KAMRAN, Park Place, they're one of the few out there that are actually having an honest conversation about Bob Chapek. And I'm hungry for that, because you don't get that at all out there. Like, it's very hard to find.
No, and if I could speak for our viewers, and I do apologize, don't want to put anything in anybody's mouth. Oh wait, man, that sounded wrong. But look, I will say, you know, I could just speak from a contributor's standpoint, right? That we're honestly, you know, with what's going on with Valiant Renegade, WDW Pro, and so forth, and even KAMRAN PASHA as he appears on Midnight's Edge and so forth. We're really the only ones, one of the only few channels, and I would include us in this, that are really talking about this at a very nuanced, insightful, and informational kind of level, you know, knowledgeable level about these things. And it is surprising. A lot of people, you know, they go for the hot take, the soundbite, or whatever, but everything that's going on right now is far more nuanced than I think people necessarily appreciate at the front end. And I love how you know, Valiant Renegade and all those guys go into it on this kind of level, because, and look, if you're a theme park fan, hey, I'm a theme park fan. You know, I that's where my heart and soul lives. But understand that these decisions, what happens in Burbank, affects Glendale, and what happens in Burbank affects Anaheim, and you can extend that out to Florida as well. Absolutely. These things really do have implications and effects in how we even interact with the parks. But moreover, it tells you the direction that the company is going, which will obviously affect the parks. And hey, the studio, as we said before on this channel, affects the parks as well. So all these things are kind of interconnected, and it all kind of stems from Burbank here. So to have these guys really go into it on this level I think is very much appreciated, and I think our audience appreciates as well. I know I do as a contributor, and sometimes, oftentimes a viewer.
No, 100%. And we've seen the evidence of Chapek sort of reining in the political stuff. Like even recently with the LaTondra Newton stuff, right? She is basically LaTondra Newton. She runs, from what I understand, she's basically the executive that kind of runs this Reimagine Tomorrow thing, right?
She is the chief diversity officer for the Walt Disney Company. So she is second to Chapek, and yeah, she has direct impact on especially the Reimagine Tomorrow group for sure.
And there was an article in the Hollywood Reporter, I think it was like last week, where they did a whole spread. The Hollywood Reporter did an entire spread about these kind of diversity officers and what have you. But the interesting thing about that article was that it said on there that Disney refused, or Disney didn't allow, or something to that effect, LaTondra Newton to speak on this topic. Yeah. And it wasn't that LaTondra Newton said, I don't want to make a comment. It said Disney decided that she wasn't going to make a comment. Now she is, and I know Valiant Renegade has made this point, and I think it's a good one. She, like you said, is second in command. She only has Chapek as her boss.
That's it.
I mean, so who would deny her the right to speak on this stuff to the Hollywood Reporter? Probably Chapek. Now, Valiant Renegade did bring up an interesting point in his video too, though. It might have been Disney's general counsel. And that's a possibility as well. Maybe the which is basically Disney's lawyer. might have said, hey, nope, sorry, zip it, you're not saying a word. But even that is a little suspect. So this is sort of like we're starting to see the evidence of what KAMRAN PASHA is talking about, where the company is very different now than it was under Bob Iger. It looks like Chapek is really trying to get this stuff out of the company. Will it be out of it completely? Are they going to go completely non-political ever? No. There's always going to be politics in there to some degree. Even under Michael Eisner, which was years ago, decades ago, there were some, PC, back then they called it like PC moves, right? Like with altering Pirates of the Caribbean. So the pirates weren't chasing women because they were sexually attracted. They were chasing women because they had bread under their arms. Remember, they changed that whole scene. So these little things were happening for a long time, and they'll continue to happen. But I think the days of like the super hyper political kind of focus that we saw under the Bob Iger era, I think those days are over. Those days are over.
And I do want to clarify something there too, because some people are like, well, did the company necessarily go political of its own volition, or did they accidentally stumble upon it, or what? I heard some pretty interesting takes on Twitter, so I just want to go ahead and clarify for the room here. Yes, Iger was very outward about taking the company in a more political direction. Maybe some people had forgotten or maybe didn't hear about them themselves. I can tell you right now, one of his goals, his stated goals, he was very public about this, was that he wanted to go ahead and take the company into a more political direction, specifically left-leaning. Why? Because, well, a lot of people have speculated, and I do believe there's evidence for this, that Bob Iger wanted to go, he wanted to run for office for 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Okay, this was pretty. If you had lived through this time period, it was very well known that this was going on, and you can probably look up articles for the viewers at home yourself. The company was going in this direction very outwardly and very aggressively. And Bob Iger's loyalists were all too happy to make that that vision a reality. But that understand for everybody, and whether you be on one side of the issue or another, that does have consequences. And I think Chapek being kind of from the retail side of things and from the theme park side of things, I think he picked up on what complications or what consequences could come from actions like that, what could result from actions like that. And I think that's why, like I said before, I think that's why he wants to pull the company out of it, because again, when you attempt to play towards one political side of the spectrum, right, you necessarily alienate the other side.
Right.
And that's just not great for the health of the company. It's not even great for the people working there, to be quite honest with you. And we've heard from a lot of people who actually actively work at the Walt Disney Company right now that they're not necessarily on board with what's going on. And maybe, has impacted their stances when it comes to staying with the company, maybe leaving the company, because of this, because it has become so hyper-partisan, not just externally, but internally. And so for a more cohesive Disney company, for a more cohesive Disney fan community and so forth, I think this is definitely the route that they should be on. Whether or not their stances and how they do it, or the damage that's been incurred is recoverable or not, we'll just have to wait and see. And like you said, OG, I think there will always be a political bent within the company. I just naturally I think that's just going to always be there. Again, a corporation is made up of people, and everybody's biased to some degree. So, will that be reflected in the work? How much of it? It's an open question. But like you said, even Michael Eisner's day, I remember when the Arabian Nights, right, as part of Disney's Aladdin. Yeah. I remember how they had to change the lyrics for that because it came off as a little bit politically insensitive, and how some of the mentality in the 90s and so forth was injected into the films at subtle levels and so forth. So I think that's always going to be part of the equation when it comes to Disney Company. But does it necessarily have to? Like I've said before, doesn't it have to, shun the other, one half of the country, or maybe even a majority of the world.
Right.
I don't think that's necessarily the case.
Well, and the issue too is that it was before, at least with Michael Eisner, it was kind of about like addressing like instances of like things that were like not politically correct at the time, right? Kind of like this very surgical thing. Oh, that doesn't work. Okay, we'll fix it.
Yeah.
But now it's almost like it's what drives the company. Like they're making decisions on future content based on like ideology, and not like based on, we have a great story, let's do that, right?
Well, look at some of the stuff surrounding Tiana's Bayou Adventure. Now, again, I'll reiterate for folks here that look, I am all about getting Princess and the Frog in the parks. And I'm actually very curious about what they do with Splash Mountain.
Yeah, me too.
I do have, kind of issues with it and so forth, but hey, if it's coming, it's coming. We'll see. At the same time, though, I mean, look at, this, I don't know, what do you call it, this town hall, this meeting that they just had where you disable the comments and they disable the dislike ratio, or hit all that kind of stuff, right? They don't necessarily talk about the story of Tiana or the story of Princess and the Frog and so forth, or they're excited about bringing the story to life or whatever. They talk about a lot of other stuff that isn't necessarily reflective of what people might necessarily expect or looking to experience when it comes to this attraction.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that some of these things aren't wrong. I'm just saying that emphasis is put in place. Like you said, the driving force of some of this stuff is political.
Right.
And it's like, or social, or whatever vernacular you want to use. It's being driven by stuff that isn't story. It's being driven by stuff that isn't character motivated. It's being driven by stuff that's, people that don't necessarily book vacation packages for. Right. And that's all we're saying. It's like, that I don't think that's a good recipe going forward. Honestly, I think that there's some problems there.
No, there is. There absolutely is. And I've said it before. It's not like, look, if an Imagineer woke up one night in the middle of the night with an epiphany, like, oh my gosh, this is brilliant. If we can put Princess and the Frog in Splash Mountain, that would be such a great idea, right? If it was like this creative epiphany, that's fine. That's awesome, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not where it came from. It came from this current theme is problematic, so we have to figure something out to put in there instead. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But when I hear Bob Iger talk about how, well, Chapek, don't follow the data, my guy. You can't follow data. Everything has to lead with creativity. Well, stuff like the Splash Mountain thing didn't lead with creativity. It led with a social issue, and then the creativity had to follow. So it was kind of funny that Iger made that little jab at Chapek, and he's not exactly doing the lead with creativity thing either.
Exactly. Absolutely. Look, and look, let's go over Splash Mountain a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Zipa Yuda was fine to play in the parks for right up until the shutdown. And we know it was fine to play in the parks because it's part of the I guess the soundtrack for Magic Happens. Right. Brand new show, premiered that year, had it in it. Nobody raised an eyebrow. Nobody said anything.
It was fine. 2020. 2020. It was like, I think it premiered like in February of 2020, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. The park shut down, I believe in March, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, mid-March, end of March, something like that.
Okay. Then, beginning very early summer of 2020, a major event happens in the Twin Cities.
Right.
Few weeks later, boom. Now, Splash Mountain and everything that is associated with it is now no longer proper, let's just say.
Right.
And it's like, well, wait a minute. Are we necessarily driven by the fact that we want to bring in somebody like Tiana and represent her story in the parks and so forth, and really, bring the story to life? Or are we driven by other things? Because the timeline suggests that you're driven by other things. I'm not saying that's necessarily right or wrong. I'm just saying, don't tell me that this is driven by what is it? Wanting to, bring Fiona in the parks when it's really about something else. Don't pee on my shoes and tell me it's raining, folks. Come on. I mean, we know why this is going on here. Everybody can see it. And look, I just don't think that being so reactive or doing things with such a kind of a partisan bent is necessarily healthy long term for the company. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, 100%. And another thing that we've been kind of talking quite a bit actually on this show was the fact that they left out Walt Disney's opening day speech on July 17th. I know that really made me mad, because that's something every year I really look forward to. That's that one moment where we can sort of like kind of pay homage to the guy that started it all, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we wouldn't even be here talking to each other or the audience if it wasn't for that man and what he did. And once a year, we get to hear this fantastic speech of the opening of Disneyland, the rededication. It's like maybe like a 10 to 15 second speech and it's done. But you know what? It really is kind of a powerful moment when that speech is being played over the park speakers, right?
Yes.
And they cut that out. And a lot of people have been talking to me saying, well, it wasn't political, OG. They just forgot it, or it was operational or whatever. Well, the fact that they forgot it, or that it was expendable enough just to cut that out over other things, tells you exactly where the current mindset is, though. Like if it was a budgetary thing or something like that, and the first thing they thought of was, let's cut Walt's speech. Well, that's also a problem, even if it wasn't political. So all around, leaving it out was a big mess. But now Walt Disney World, from what I understand, is even going through their whole kind of version of this, which is actually probably even worse, to be honest. It's a little more permanent than a one-time event, which is there are talks, there are murmurs. Again, this is rumor, total rumor. But there are talks that that Disney is considering removing the Walt from Walt Disney World. So it would be the Disney World Resort, I guess. And now, look, I'm hearing, and maybe we'll play a little bit of this Disney Dish podcast from Jim Hill and Len Testa. We're hearing that it's for marketing kind of purposes to kind of streamline everything. But the timing of this could not be worse, in my opinion. They just cut Walt's speech out at Disneyland because we've speculated because of the America stuff. And now they want to cut the Walt out of the Disney World moniker. This doesn't look good. Regardless of what the reason is, whether it's political or some other reason, why are they doing this? It makes no sense to me. No sense.
It really doesn't. And look, I'm going to say it again, folks. It makes sense if you're looking through what the company's output, how the company represents itself, or how the parks are represented through a political lens. Because there are some people who feel that Walt was a controversial figure. Right. Now, as we've said before on this show, by others, I believe a contributor Alia has said this as well. Yeah. Look, if you are working for the Walt Disney Company and you believe that Walt Disney is a controversial figure, maybe the place isn't for you, to be in all honesty. I'm not trying to gatekeep or anything like that, but look, this bears the founder's name. That ain't going nowhere. And I understand it has been branded as something else, but it's still Walt Disney, the Walt Disney Company. Right. And so, look, if you have problems with the founder, that's not going to be an easy thing to overcome. There's going to be some pushback there, and I think rightfully so, because, like you said, the whole reason why people are watching this right now, the whole reason why you and I are the brothers that we are, that we're brothers with Disney family man George. Well, it's in his name. It's because of Disney. It's because of that man that started this whole thing. And so, if that's not, if those kind of that kind of value isn't valuable to you, maybe that's not the place for you. It's just that. Look, I can't, I don't want to come off as a gatekeeper, but it's true. I mean, it's like, this bears the founder's name. Anyway, as far as Walt Disney World is concerned, this is a very interesting story, and we have some audio here that might shed some light on this. So let's go ahead and play this right now.
Thing I wanted to point out here is that in this particular survey, Disney uses DisneyWorld.com, but there's a rumor going around that Disney's going to change the name of the resort to Disney World as one word, like Disneyland. Have you seen that?
Some of this has to do with quote-unquote brand issues.
That's what I thought.
We actually saw Walt Disney Pictures become Disney within the past decade. And do we finally default to what people are actually calling the resort? They're not saying the Walt Disney World Resort. They're saying Disney World.
Disney World, yeah. And then a lot of people do actually say it as one word.
Yeah.
Or write it out as one word, yeah.
Yeah. Do we pretend this is the name we insist you use?
Yeah. Is this the battle we want to fight? Is this a hill we're going to die on?
No,
yeah.
That's it exactly. My name is Jonathan Moore. No, we call you Skippy. Okay, you're Skippy.
Exactly. So
that is what's going on there. OG, what do you think?
No, I think. Look, it sounds like from what Jim and Len are saying that it would be done not for political reasons, to be fair, but it would be more about like just kind of streamlining the marketing. And the funny thing about that whole thing is like, why? Because it's not like Walt Disney World is a struggling entity. Like it's the most visited. Well, it had the most visited theme park in the world, the Magic Kingdom. It's a very successful overall resort. Okay, it's not broken, so why are we trying to fix it? I don't understand that. If you want to call it Disney World, call it Disney World, but there's no need to spend millions and millions of dollars on changing all the plastic, the plates and the napkins and this, that, and everything that has the old logo and the old name on it. For what? For what? You're gonna spend all that money? Why? I don't understand the purpose of it. It's bizarre to me. It's absolutely bizarre to me.
Again, and it speaks to what we were saying before with Walts Speech, right? Even if it was budgetary or kind of a momentary lapse in judgment, you still have a culture that believes that's that doesn't put Walt at the forefront with everything they do.
Oh, it's totally expendable.
Exactly, 100%. So it's like that's an indictment. That's still an indictment of maybe not actions at the time, but actions taking place that you wouldn't actually have Walt at the forefront here. Of when it comes to decision making, or maybe kind of Walt's values when it came to the park and so forth.
Right.
So the idea that we would go with this change for branding purposes, I don't know, man. I mean, even if it is for those kind of things, again, it's still the same indictment that we had last time, which is you have a culture here inculcated within the company that feels it's acceptable to remove the Walt out of Walt Disney World. That is wild to me. And to give our viewers some perspective, as you astutely pointed out earlier in the DMs, Roy Disney named it Walt Disney World specifically in order to honor his late brother Walt, who had recently passed away in 1966.
Right.
He was very clear on this. We all see we've all seen the special there, where Walt Disney is talking about the Florida project, right? He's talking about Epcot and so forth, and he calls it Disney World, most famously. And I believe it's even in the text that was used for the type that was used for Disneyland's logo, right? And he talks about, and there you go, we're going forward with the Florida project. Well, he passes away. Roy goes into, he takes like a 6-month sabbatical almost, or, just walks away from just about everything because, again, he was going to retire. He actually, he basically gave his retirement papers to Walt himself and saying, hey, I'm walking out. Here we go. I think you've got it here and you're all set. And Walt said, hey, you know what? Don't even worry about it, Roy. We can take things over from here. We got enough money coming in from Disneyland. Some of our other projects will be fine. When Walt dies, Roy is thrust out of retirement, and he's got a decision to make. Do I go forward with parting out the company to RCA and some of these other companies and corporations who are circling the waters, or do I take charge of this company and go forward with Walt Disney's last and greatest dream? I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. And that was a big moment. And part of that speech where he announces that he's coming back, that he's going forward with the Florida project, was, and we're naming it Walt Disney World for my brother.
Right.
It was a very impactful moment for him, and he basically died fulfilling Walt's dream.
Wow.
He passes away very shortly after the project's actually completed. And so this idea, the fact that we're even having this discussion should tell you.
It's really disgusting. It's really disgusting. I'm sorry. It's really disgusting.
There's a rot, man. There's a rot within the company. I'm just saying.
It's really disgusting. I mean, you're right. There's so much to that naming of the Walt Disney World Resort because of Roy, and he, like you said, he was thrust into this, which Roy was totally out of his element, but he pushed through to get this done for his brother, and then the cherry on the top of it all was, I'm going to name it Walt Disney World, and that's my homage to my brother. And then the marketing team is going to go in there and decide, well, you know what? Our focus groups say that the Walt in there is, too long. And please, you know what? If people want to call it Disney World, call it Disney World. Sure. But leave Walt Disney World on the signage.
100%.
100%. It's crazy to me.
That is the official moniker. And look, it was the largest private construction project in the world leading up to that point, $400 million. And that was all with the moniker Walt Disney World. And it's stayed that way for the last 50 years. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but apparently they're celebrating like a 50th anniversary or something at Walt Disney World. I don't know. I mean, that's what I hear. That's what I'm told. I had to confirm. We'll see. But allegedly, in the branding there, it's Walt Disney World. And that's how people have really associated it for that long. I understand that's not the... not everybody says Walt Disney World. The fans and purists might, but I understand that the general audience might not. Doesn't mean you rebrand the entire resort just because of some stupid monikers that people call the park. I mean, they could call it, I don't know. They can call it Mouse World. You're gonna rename it Mouse World? No, It's Walt Disney World. That's what it is. If people want to, like you said, if people want to refer to it as something else, they can.
Right.
But I think, Walt's inclusion, whether it be in the actual title for the Florida resort itself, or when it comes to Walts Speech, these are very important things.
They are.
These are very important traditions that we've, that the company has upheld and that fans have kind of passed on. To undo that, it's not good.
And that's why Disney is what it is. Because if you look at every other studio on the planet, they got their fans. There's no doubt. I'm not going to diminish Warner Brothers. They got a huge fan base, and Paramount and Universal. All these studios are fantastic studios, but none of them have the emotional resonance that you have with Disney. Disney is a whole other animal. It really is. And it's a whole other animal because of the history, because of that Walt Disney connection, that scrappy kid coming from Marceline to LA with $30 in his pocket. He's going to change the world. That's why people are drawn to it so much. No one knows who started Paramount. No one knows. No one really knows about. Most people don't really understand how did Warner Brothers get up and running, or MGM. No, but they know the Walt Disney storyline for the most part, that this guy created this amazing company, and that's what really resonates with people, and that's why the company is set aside compared to these other studios. And when you take that element out of it, Disney becomes every other studio. You're taking away the one thing that's making Disney more more emotional, more special. You're taking that one thing out of it, and you're making it like everything else.
Absolutely. 100%. Couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, look at, I remember the Imagineers talking about the inception and the creation for Buena Vista Street. And one of the things that was really profound in their research that they did, and just, from what they were hearing, was it was almost like the general populace didn't know that Walt was a person anymore. Right. That it just became a brand. They didn't know who Walt Disney was, what his story was, and why he was so important and integral to the company. So Buena Vista Street was a love letter to Walt. That's why there's so many Walt Disney references embedded in Buena Vista Street. That's why it's kind of made from his perspective, and that's why he's featured prominently in statue form with the Buena Vista version of the Partners statue. It's why he's there is to kind of bring him back and to honor this man that frankly has brought so many different people together and employs so many now as a direct result of his work and what he brought to the world. Epcot is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, just about to get a Walt Disney statue of its own.
Right. Yeah, they are.
So to go from that within the matter of 10 years,
right.
maybe a little more, to this, it's very disheartening.
It is. And look, the companies have tried to rebrand before and to not much success. Coca-Cola is the first one that comes to my mind. I know that they rebranded to just Coke, I guess in the 80s, and they changed the formula a little bit and it was a total failure. And now they're back to Coca-Cola, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes this stuff, it just leave well enough alone. Like, my God, leave well enough alone. But there is an element in there, though. And I know a lot of people like to kind of poo-poo it, and that's fine. This is just my personal belief. But there's definitely an element, and I think you touched upon it too, Dre, where there are people out there that really do find Walt Disney very problematic. And so I can see why a current Disney right now that is very focused on that, the problematic elements and getting rid of it. And I could see why these Walt, the speech, the name, why they're systematically trying to remove them. And that might not be the case. I don't know for sure, but I can understand it. I can see that possibly being the case. And that's very, very sad to me. And to kind of circle back to the original topic, this is why it's important for Bob Chapek to get the politics the hell out of Disney so we can get Walt back in here and we can stop being so like partisan. Really kind of, it just needs to stop. It needs to stop, This is kind of where I'm at with it.
That's it. And it's doing damage to the company. I mean,
big time.
I understand that Twitter and Reddit have banned this word, but the G word and the association Disney has is out there.
Right.
It's not good, folks. It really isn't. But even beyond that, people feel differently about the Disney company now for one reason or another because of their political perspective, and they gotta get out of that. They have to. Yeah. And like we said, what happens in Burbank affects the parks, affects Florida. Well, maybe Walt Disney World branding, maybe that's a reflection of that. And again, like you said, I think it's important for Chapek to kind of rein this in a little bit before things get too out of hand. From what we understand, there is a new policy policies taking place that are being written up and drawn up, and that will be announced here, maybe between November and March. That might set a new course for the entire company. Kind of this, holistic view at it, and saying, "Hey, look, we're gonna go a little bit more central with our product or with our content going forward."
Right.
And I think that is really important to reestablish here. I think that's really important to kind of to go in that direction, because I do think it will be beneficial for the company in the long run. I mean, it's just those things can't happen fast enough. I also wanted to bring up one more point, and we didn't bring it up before, and I want to go ahead and bring it up right now, because some ado was made over this kind of Hulu arrangement, right? When it came to political advertising and so forth, and how, and this kind of came into this discussion as well with Bob Chapek, right? Because people were saying, I guess the assertion was that the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, and their Senate committee, in particular, was wanting to go ahead and put ads on Hulu, and they were wanting to they wanted to put ads featuring how should I say this, political stances, maybe referring to some maybe legislation that wanted to be passed by these various parties and so forth. And people were saying, well, these issues aren't political, and it's and in order to poo-poo Chapek's statement, I'll say this. I'll agree that maybe inherently they might not be political, but they have absolutely been made political by the various parties, and that goes for both sides. By the way, they have absolutely been made political, And so, yes, I mean, you could say it. They're maybe they're not, but both sides can do that too, as you astutely pointed out, right? That it's just like, yeah, okay, maybe I don't know, contraception maybe isn't political, right? But the other side can say that too. The other side can voice stuff on it that maybe it is or isn't or whatever.
Right.
The more important thing is does the company necessarily want to be this kind of, I don't know, third party advocate for somebody else's cause? That was kind of, I think, the major source of contention for them. And so initially they said, no, we're not going to do that. And then publicly they kind of conceded, right? They kind of said, you know what? After evaluating our stances, maybe we will show these ads. But that wasn't the whole story. What's interesting is that as Valiant Renegade and WDW Pro, they put out a video on this topic specifically, and what they alluded to was, apparently from their sources that they're hearing, was that maybe there was a public concession, but maybe it was a public concession in the same way that maybe the events in April of this year were a public concession. And maybe privately there was a different stance. From what we understand here, there was a political ad that the DNC wanted to go ahead and showcase on Hulu during those ad blocks, correct? And apparently Disney initially declined it and sent it back for revision.
Right.
And that's a very interesting thing. From what we understand, there's two routes this could have gone. One was the more like the ABC route, right? Where they basically show everything. Now, understand that the company has little impact on that because though that channel is regulated by the FCC. Not so much when it comes to streaming. And so they took the ESPN approach as a result in order to maybe be a little bit more choosy in what they actually take on and show on the platform. And they were very clear, from what I understand, and very clear going forward, that they're not going to get access to Disney Plus. Any of these political groups, regardless of side or political persuasion, because Disney Plus is seen more as the family type a platform within their streaming kind of within their direct consumer division. Right. So that's interesting because that ad tier for Disney Plus is coming, and it's coming hard and it's coming fast. It's going to come big. Right. So to deny it outright from various political actors, and I would say that goes for both sides here. That's a very interesting point.
That's very interesting.
I think a lot of people would be interested in that, and they're saying flat out that's not going to happen. But in order to, to concede a little bit or to come to some sort of middle ground, that's where the Hulu issue came in. And even then, they are being choosy with what they platform there. So it's a little bit more nuanced than maybe the headlines might lend itself to. But there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that might still, even that with that public concession made, that might suggest that they're going in a different direction.
No, 100%, 100%. And one thing I want to ask you, or even the audience, I want to ask this generalized question, because I'm really, really curious. I hear a lot on social media and what have you, sometimes in my comments even, well, Disney needs to speak out about things like the Florida bill and things like that, because Disney has people that are from these like marginalized groups.
Sure.
They need to feel comfortable working there. That's fair. That's honestly fair. Like you don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable or like unsafe or anything like that. And I think everyone's on board with everyone feeling safe and comfortable at work. That's totally cool. Mm-hmm. But my question though, when I keep hearing that, is that like, do like members of these groups, LGBTQ plus, community that work at like say Universal, do they not feel comfortable at Universal because Universal didn't speak out about the bill? And this is an honest question. I don't really hear from Universal team members saying like, well, they didn't speak out about the bill, so I feel like it's a hostile work environment. I don't really hear that. Maybe it is. I don't know. But I just feel like it's kind of like, okay, well, Universal didn't speak out about it, and the team members are just fine, getting along just fine and doing their thing. Why wouldn't a Disney cast member feel the same way if they didn't get involved with the Florida bill. And this is an honest question I'm asking, and maybe you know the answer, Dre. Like, what do you think? What's your speculation on it? Because like I don't really know. Like, I feel like it wouldn't change the dynamic at all. We have laws in this country protecting workers from discrimination and what have you. I don't know what Disney speaking out against the bill is going to change outside of the laws we already have that exist on the books, right? I mean, am I crazy?
Well, it didn't. I mean, that's the kind of ironic thing, right? The company was very public and speaking out against HB 1557 as featured in Florida during March and April. And it didn't change anything. In fact, it made their position in Florida a little bit less advantageous, and maybe they lost power in that deal. So I don't know if that was necessarily a great long-term strategy right there.
Right.
But I'll say this. My only issue with attempting to make people feel, safer or accepted within a work environment is that people think of historically marginalized communities, and I would say that's true, but there are other marginalized communities that can claim a marginalized status that would probably like to be represented as well. And do you necessarily go in all those different directions? Maybe there's somebody at the company who maybe think the Germans of the 1940s weren't necessarily the worst people in the world, right? And I'm sure they feel very marginalized. And I would say, rightfully so. But, okay, well, does the company make an external policy reflecting the predilections of that one individual? See, that's where it kind of gets like a little bit more like, okay, well, obviously there is a limit here. And right. I would agree that you should have internal policies and so forth, and you should have internal measures in place in order to make people feel as included as possible.
100%.
But when you take an external stance, now that's kind of a different issue here, because now you're getting into the eyes of the public and so forth, and that can take a different view. That can take a different. Well, look, the RCID, is gonna get destroyed because, or I should say, reformed more accurately, right? But the RCID as we know it today might not exist, right? Come June 2023, and listen, the company said it's our mission to do X, Y, and Z. Fight this out in the legislature, maybe elect politicians, right? Fight this out in the courts, affect, political predilections or legislation across the entire country. That's a big step up there.
Yeah.
And, some people felt, whoa, that's maybe a little bit too far there.
Yeah.
Look, I very much have sympathy with all marginalized groups. Don't get me wrong, or I should say at least historically marginalized groups. Don't get me wrong, I do. At the same time, when it comes to external statements and so forth, to speak to your point about Universal, I think they were the ones that kind of evaluated and said, obviously we want to treat our team members with respect. Obviously, we want to go ahead and include all sorts of, all types of people. This is a workplace for everybody.
Right.
But are we necessarily going to get into a fight with the governor over it? I don't think so.
Right.
And I think, look, people can argue whether that was right or wrong or whatever, but I don't necessarily think it's the worst position in the world to maybe, even if you wanted to make a stance, maybe not such an aggressive stance. That's all.
No, yeah, it was pretty heavy. Like it was like that whole thing where like, oh, we're gonna work to get the bill repealed. It was like, come on, Disney. Like now you're just becoming basically like an arm of like the Democratic Party at that point. It's like, come on, you're an entertainment company. That's what you do, and. I just thought that was you're right. It was such an overreaction. It was crazy. I've never seen anything so like overtly political coming from the Walt Disney Company. That was really wild to me.
It was, and they said it was their company mission, if I'm not mistaken, or something to
like
that
that.
effect.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, wait a minute. If that's a company mission, I mean, is there a earnings report on that? Because apparently, I mean, I would guess shareholders are funding that sort of activity. Where's the earnings report suggesting how successful that they've been in this mission that we're now all being informed about?
Yeah.
I mean, you know there's
too
some.
much.
I'm just saying, folks. This situations like this require a lot more nuance than just, I don't know, statements given out of hand or you know, it's not. What I'm saying is, it's not as black and white as maybe even like it to be.
Right.
There's a lot more gray, and you know, as Walt Disney World found out, when you do stuff like that, you know, sometimes there can be pushback, and so maybe the more aggressive or the more aggressive stance wasn't the best idea going forward. Maybe Chapek's original position,
Oh yeah.
where you know the company's values be reflected in their content and other forms of you know,
Right.
speaking out against legislation or whatever, maybe is the far better take. I would even go one step further in that I think there are kind of fundamental values that kind of bring us all together,
Yeah.
and kind of unify us, whether it be, you know,
Like family.
left or right. Yeah, family.
Like very human
yes.
stories that, you
Human
know.
stories. Exactly, 100%. And I think that kind of unifying, what should I say? that kind of unifying take on the content, the ability to bring people together, I think will have a much better impact on just about everything than a statement here or, I don't
Right.
know, a message here embedded within this film.
Oh
People
yeah.
can kind of come together and kind of rally around, more, like you said, a more humanistic take on everything, you know, which the Walt Disney Company was the best probably
Founded
in
on.
the world of doing.
Yeah.
I think that's going to have a far bigger impact. And I think maybe that's precisely what Chapek was speaking about, but I don't want to put words in his mouth either.
No, I think you're right. I think, and I don't want to put words in his mouth either, but like I do think that's what he's speaking of. If you look at like the Walt Disney era of like animation or even the parks, right? Like When You Wish Upon a Star, doesn't matter who you are. It's a very inclusive message. It's hopeful, but it's very human. It's not political. It's not, right? The Walt Disney opening day speech, to all who come to this happy place. I want it to be a joy and inspiration to all the world. Very human, very just core, like we're all in this together kind of messaging, but it's not raw. It's not in your face political at all. And I think that's like what you said. I think that's what Chapek wants to get down to, is that inclusiveness through the content, right? But not outright overtly political, you know, and stuff like that. And I think that is the right move. And that's really what Walt Disney set when he built the company. He was doing that as early as, well, Pinocchio was what, 1940, I think 1940, 1941, something like that.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. He's been doing this since the beginning, you know, and just continue that trend. And that's evergreen. That resonates just as well today as it did back then. It's inclusive. It includes everybody. There's no, you know, that kind of messaging, that human spirit is really the route Disney should go in and get out of this whole, we're going to fight to repeal this bill in Florida and this other bill over here and this, that, and the other. Disney is not a political party. Get out of all that garbage. Absolutely. And politicians aren't even popular. Why would they even want to dive into that? Like it's an ugly game, right? And nobody likes politicians. Like, why would Disney even want to get into that? It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And Chapek, I really hope, man, if you're watching this, I really hope you can get the politics out of Disney and really get it back to what the core of what this company is, because it needs it. And who knows? You know what? Look, I mean, I know this is probably going to be unpopular, but Chapek might be the guy that actually saves the Walt Disney Company, because if they were to continue down this route, there wouldn't be much Disney left. I can tell you that right now.
That is a crazy crazy thing to say, but I've been having the same thoughts myself for the last couple of months. He might be the guy that saves it. And honestly, I mean, it's look, it's one of these things, right? You know, sometimes when we're looking at the Walt Disney Company, as it's, you know, actively, I don't know, taking place, right? As it's actively developing, maybe sometimes we don't see the cracks in the foundation. We don't see the things that maybe might be damaging long term. And I think a lot of people did that, under Iger, because honestly, frankly, I think he was a better salesman at selling it.
Oh, he was. He was a much better salesman. Bob Iger, with all his faults, could sell snow to a snowman. I mean, this guy was good.
He was good. He was really good. But I think that clouded a lot of people's judgment, including my own.
100%. Yeah,
I mean,
too.
you know, I think we all had kind of the rose-colored glasses on. And I think Chapek, I think to his credit, just from his outright honesty, if anything else, but I think he's really shown that maybe some of the things that happened under the Iger, admin weren't necessarily in the company's best interests. Maybe it was in his best interests.
Right.
And I think taking the company back in a more kind of singularly focused, profit-driven direction, I think is the best thing for the company at this point. Again, maybe Chapek's not the guy, 5-10 years from now. But he's the guy now, and I think he's the best poised in order to make this whole thing work. And I think the board and they are committed to doing that. Quite honestly, it's interesting. We had both remarked at the well, I mean, you were the one that brought it up first, but it's this kind of town hall where apparently these words were uttered by Chapek that started this video, right? He looked a lot more relaxed. Maybe even has some facial hair. I don't know. I can't see the photo for myself, but hey, look, if he ever plans to do it, he looks good with it. I will say, I can kind of envision it, right? But from KAMRAN PASHA's own words, apparently from his source, what he's telling him, he was saying that the Chapek looked about as relaxed as he's ever seen him. About as comfortable as he's ever seen him. And that's a really, really interesting point. Something I want to kind of leave our viewers on, just like, why do you think that is? If I was speculating myself, I mean, he just got solidified for a 3-year contract. This is, as we've remarked on this show before, that this is the first time that he really has full ownership and control of the Disney company, as empowered to him by the board, with removing all of the other elements like Bob Iger leading the creative or whatever, Peter Rice and all that. He really has full control. And as we've told Chapek to do before, it's like, hey, be yourself.
Yes.
Be comfortable in your own skin. Don't try to be anybody else. Be you. Because even if you go down, you'll go down doing it your way, and you'll feel a lot better about yourself, no matter what happens.
No, 100%. Yeah, and it seems like he's leaning into Chapek. He's not trying to be Bob Iger light anymore. Or the first year or so of Bob Chapek's term as CEO, he was really like I feel like he didn't know how to behave. Like how am I supposed to be, right? Should I can I try to emulate Bob Iger, or how should I? And now, like Pasha was saying, and we've noticed too, like he seems to really come into his own, and he's starting to become like he's setting his own path, his own identity. That's the way to go. That's absolutely the way to go. And his mission, it seems like, or at least one of his big missions, is getting Disney out of this stuff and getting a lot more neutral. And you know what? I support that. I'm not going to support everything Bob Chapek does, but this is something that I think is very important that the company needs to do. And he seemed to be really dedicated in doing it, which I like.
And an important distinction that we should bring out to our viewers here, we're not advocating for, if we come off this way, we're not advocating for, I don't know, right-leaning content or, left-leaning content over here when it suits. No. Unifying content that isn't partisan, content that isn't divisive. That's what we're all advocating for. I think that's what Chapek himself is advocating for.
Right.
He hasn't said anything that alludes to, we're going we're going in this direction because the midterms are coming up and we want to be on this side of the political spectrum now. No, he said,
No.
hey, look, listen, no matter
We're
what
staying out
happens
of
in the
it.
country, we're going to be a little bit more centrist, and we're going to be, inclusive to the broadest spectrum possible. And I think that's it. And I think that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad message. And if he, like you said, OG, if he can do this, he might be just the guy to save the Walt Disney Company.
Yeah, and we got an upcoming video with our buddy George, Disney Family Man. We're gonna dive in a little bit more about D23 Expo, but with how Chapek is looking and how he's kind of coming into his own right now, very curious about how he does on stage with that, and we'll discuss that in a couple of days. But that is something that I'm really going to have a keen eye on, because that's going to be very telling.
Oh,
because
yes.
he's known to be very awkward, but if he gets on there, he's slick and he's comfortable in his own skin, and that'll be very telling. I'd be wow, that would be pretty surprising, and that would be refreshing.
Expo cannot come fast enough.
It cannot, absolutely. But producer Dre, Vash Guy, Dr. Dre, I want to thank you so much, brother, for coming on. This was a fascinating subject. Dove into a lot of great stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to just say thank you to Valiant Renegade and WDW Pro and that Park Place and KAMRAN. They really do some great content. They really do. They break this stuff down in a really intelligent way, and I just want to give them a shout out. Links down below.
Mm-hmm.
But Dre, if you can let everyone home before we close it out, where they can find you on social media, sir.
Hey, best place to interact with me is going to be at Vash Guy. It's right down there for all the, what Christine Wasteland McCarthy would say, for all the robust discussion. You can go ahead and do so right down there. Yeah, I'm not going to let that go, by the way, and then it is catching on. I love it. I love it. Oh, man. She, oh, boy. I can't believe she said that. Anyway, that's a whole other story. And hey, if you want to see me, well, you can go ahead and subscribe to this channel right here at Orange Grove 55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice and news and info squeezed fresh right from the Grove. I'm telling you, folks, go ahead down there, subscribe. You definitely look. I'm gonna be real with you guys. You definitely want to be subscribed. If, like I said, we might have a special guest coming on here, talking all kinds of stuff. Oh man, it's gonna be so good. It's gonna be fire, guys. That's all I'm gonna say. So please go ahead, hit that subscription down below, that button down below. Hey, even put on notifications. I'm telling you guys, you do not want to miss this. It's gonna be great.
It's gonna be fantastic. Thank you all so much for watching. Comment down below, like, subscribe, hit the bell, and as always, have a wonderful day.